How's it going, guys? Welcome to another Soul Encoded tutorial. Today we're going to be covering a very important topic, which are common methods in arrays, strings, and objects. Now, as arrays, strings, and objects are probably the most common data types that you'll use in JavaScript, having a good understanding of common methods and properties that these data types has to offer will help you immensely when you're trying to learn how to program. Without further ado, let's dive right into the material. The first topic that we'll discuss is arrays. Arrays in JavaScript is just a collection of items. They're denoted with brackets, and you guys are probably already familiar with using arrays by now. If you have been following this series, you have been already introduced to the topic of arrays. But today, let's just go through as many as the most commonly used method when it comes to arrays. Now, let's create an array with just a few numbers in it, just to get started. var 1, 2, 3. Now, I'm going to show you a very common property called length. All length does is it returns how many items in the array there are. Let's go ahead and print that. 3. Alright, let's move back. In the previous lesson, we talked about how an array is just an object in JavaScript and it has a lot of methods and properties attached to it. Now, I'm going to show you the most common and most useful methods that are attached to arrays. So, let's do this. How do you remove an item from an array? There's many ways to do this, but let's say you want to remove the very last index item. All you would do is array.pop, like so. Let's go ahead and log this array. Let's also go ahead and log the array before we have invoked the pop function. Let's add a few notes to this. Initial array pop. Let's go ahead and invoke that. Initial array, and then after pop. Next, let's go ahead and try to add to the very end of the array. So that's push. And with push, you have to provide an argument, a value. So this could be anything, but let's just say 5 for now. Let's also go ahead and log this, and we'll call it push. Let's invoke that. And we have pop and push. And as you can see, 5 has been added. Let's move along to shift. So shift is very similar to pop, but instead of removing it at the very end of the array, you move the first item of the array. So let's try shift, and then let's log that. As you can see, of the value 1, the first indexed item has been removed. All right, continuing on. What about unshift? Unshift is like push, but you're adding it to the very beginning of the index. So unshift. So let's say 7 for now, and we'll console log that. Shift. Looks like I made a misspelling here. And there you go. It has added to the front of the array. So what if you want to remove an item that's not in the beginning or at the end of the array? To do that, we could use a function called Splice. Now, Splice works a little bit different than push or pop or shift or unshift. In fact, there's kind of 2 to 3 parts to it. So you could say array.splice, and then the first argument that you pass to it is kind of where the index where you want to start at. So let's say that we want to do index 1, so that's 0, 1, and then we want to remove just one item from it. So you would just say 1, and that's enough to remove items. Now you could also provide another argument here, and you could say like 5, and that would be the item that you want to add in place of the item that you removed. So let's go ahead and try this first. Splice. And there you go. We removed that second index. Now let's try to add an item into that location. Notice that now our array size is 2. We need to put it in place and to increase the array size. So we will do something like this. and this should insert it right in between. And one thing to note is that Splice actually returns an array as well. So if we console log this Splice before, you'll see right here that it has pulled out the 2 and returned that as an array. That's just something to note so that you could use that value if that's what you're trying to do when you're trying to just maybe pull out a few numbers from the array. That's something you could do. Let's move on to some of these sorting and reversing, kind of moving the entire array around. So let's do reverse. Super simple. Console log dot. We can say reverse. All you do is array dot reverse. Simple, right? And there you go. We have reversed the order. So it was 795 and now it's 597. Now for the last one, we're going to sort the array. Sort. And then we're going to have sort. And as you can see, the reverse order was 597 and now it's 579. So that's pretty much it for basically arrays that have to do with mutating the array. Changing things, pulling things out, adding to it, things like that. Now let's move on to kind of array methods that have to do with accessing some state of the array. So let's go back to this example. Let's say that we want to take this array, create another array, and then so let's say that we have 2 arrays like this, and we want to make a third array that's a combination of it, right? Combination. So you could do array.concat, and then you pass in the second array. And when you do this, you'll have the combination of those 2 arrays. So concat is a very useful method. Moving on. Now let's say that you want to look through the array really quickly and see if a certain number exists or a certain item exists. So let's do 2 cases where we'll look for the number 5 in the combination array, and we'll also look for the number 7 in the combination array. So to do that, we could use a function called includes, and it includes returns a boolean. And then we could say 5, so this will be true. Don't forget to log this. So this will be true, and then 7 will be false, right? So let's go ahead and do this. So we'll get true, false. And there you go, true and false. So let's say that we want to find the index of the item that we found. Then what do we do? So we could use index of. So let's say console.log, and then the combination, which is just our array, and then you can say index of, we could do 2. Let's go ahead and print that. And now notice that it's 1, and just remember that it's 0, 1, so it is actually the second one. So you could imagine being able to do a lot of interesting things, right? Like you have a value and you need to find that index where that value is so that you could change it or pull from it, things like that. One thing to note is that if you don't have a valid value, it will return -1 for your index. So let's say 9, right? This will return -1. So that's just something to know about how index of works. Let's remove some of these logs. Let's continue on to do last index of. So one thing about last index of, something I forgot to mention for index of, is that let's say that we have a duplicate number. So let's add a few duplicate numbers here. So let's add another 4 here, and let's add another 2 over here. Let's go ahead and print that real quick just to show you guys it's still combining together. So we have a 2 in the front here, and we also have a 2 in the back here. So if we go back to doing index of, and then we pass in the value 2, it will actually return to us probably just value 1, right? The reason why this is because that is at index 1, but there's also this value 2 at the very end of the array as well. So if you want to, so the way index of works is it just returns the first instance of the value from left to right. Now if you want to do it the other way, you use last index of. And let's go and print that. And then you get 7. So that's right here, the last index. So that last index of goes from right to left. It's just minor differences, but they're both very useful. So moving on. Oftentimes you want to combine, change your data types, right? And join is one of those that allows you to combine all of your array values into a single string. This is how you do it. So you say array join, and then in here you provide a character or a space or something that you separate the individual values of. So you could say comma if you want a comma separated, which is very common, right, for CSVs, which is comma separated values. So if we print that, you'll see that now our array has been changed to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, I should probably use combination. There you go. Let me also show you that you could use something else like just empty space, and then that also becomes a string. One thing to note here is that even though you have joined this array, the array itself still is not destroyed. As you can see, all join does, it creates the string and returns that value. So note that it's not destructive. And as you're going through all of these methods, just always be mindful and try to see like which ones are actually destructive and which ones are not destructive, right? Because that's very important. So speaking of destructive versus not destructive, previously I have shown you guys Splice, right? But there's a brother to it called Slice. And it does a very similar thing, but the difference is that Slice does not destroy the current array. So it allows us to access the combination. And just like Splice, we provide the initial index that we want to remove. So let's just say 1, and then we'll remove 2 items from it. But we're not removing, we're just kind of accessing 2 of them. And as you can see, we have removed 2, the value 2. Let's remove more just to show you guys that this is how it works. So 2, 3, and 4. All right, so that's Slice. And finally, as you have seen that you could use join, but if you want to very quickly just change everything into a string, you could also just do toString. Combination dot toString. And there you go. And that's it for methods for just accessing the array in kind of a non-destructive way. So the next part we'll actually talk a lot about in the next particular video for higher order functions. Now let's go into strings. Strings has properties and methods just like arrays. Again, it's just a JavaScript object. Let's go over a common string hello, and then let's print out the length. Just like the array function, the length will print out how many characters that are in the string. So hello has 5 characters. Now speaking of a character, what is a character? All character is just one letter of the string. So these are some of the common methods. Let's go through them one at a time. So char at. All char at does is it returns the particular index that you give it. So let's console log, and then we can say char at. And then we can say str char at, and then let's just say 2. So what is the character at 2? It's L. So it's 0, 1, 2. So it's returning that L. Now the char code at returns the Unicode version. So let's run char code at Now, what is 108? 108 is essentially the UTF-16's character representation of the letter L. So if we go quickly to UTF-16, right, so which is basically a standard, a Unicode standard. And if we go to 16 and let's type in 108 to see if what letter that is. Right here you'll see that that value 108 UTF-16 is L. So why would you need the decimal value? Well, let's say that you want to compare two strings for some reason, you can do that because all of the letters inside of your string have a Unicode associated with them. But yeah, that's kind of what char code add is. Moving on, string also has an includes function, which kind of can take a sub-range of strings or substring and kind of see if that particular string exists. So let's do console log and includes as well, and then we could say, so hello has EL, right? So let's do string.includes, and then you pass in the string that you're looking for, EL, and let's also pass in a string that is not true, so not true. Let's don't forget to close these console logs. And we have true and we have not true. Perfect. Moving on. So let me get rid of a few of these logs here. Okay. Now we also have, very similar to arrays, we have index of and last index of. Let me quickly show you guys just for sakes, but you guys should know what these do anyways. So we say index of, and we can say O, str index of, or last index of this is this O, and then we could do E. One thing to know here, again, index of starts from left to right, and last index of starts from right to left. So just remember that. What did I do? Debugging like a pro. 4 and 1. So that's that. Super quick, super fast. You guys should be right up there with me. Now, moving on, you guys, there's something very similar to array slice. It just grabs a section. It's non-destructive, I believe. So let's go ahead and console log slice here. And the way you do it is slice, and same thing, you give it an index. So if we want to start from the second, like E, we do 1, and then we could say comma like 3, for example, and that would give us slice and L, right? Moving on, so these are all just kind of different ways to pull different, sub version, basically different ways to pull like different parts of the string, and this is the difference between them. Slice is beginning to end, and it's all arranged. You could add a range. This substring is from and then to, and then sub str is start to length, so you give it a length. But yeah, that's pretty much slice and substring and other substring. They're all pretty much the same. They have slight differences. I think you guys can figure that out on your own. So moving on, there's a function called split, which splits your string into an array. So let's do a quick example. So let's say that we want to make this guy, this hello, into an array. So we do str.split, and then we pass it something to split by. And because hello doesn't have anything to split by, you could just do empty space. And then if you do, R, and then if we log the array, you'll now notice that now we have an array with all of our letters inside as values. So that's split. Now let's do two things. Let's you could take a string and you could uppercase all of the letters, and you could also lowercase them, right? So everything is lowercase here, so let's go ahead and do uppercase first. str dot to uppercase like so, and when we check that out, it's hello. Now let's take that exact same thing and then do to lowercase. And it's hello. Let's actually verify if this is destructive or not. So it looks like it's not destructive, so to lowercase is actually not doing anything. So let's create another string called upper. Goes, hey. And then we could do like so. Hey, lowercase. So it's good to, as I was mentioning, always be thinking about whether or not this particular method is being destructive, or is it not being destructive. So those are good things to think about as you're going through these methods and learning about them, because sometimes they'll do things that you're not really intending it to do, and there may be another method or just like a different way of doing things. Now finally, there is toString. You have already seen this. There's also something called trim. Now trim is used a lot when you're working with inputs and outputs. So let's say that you're reading a value and it says value, and there's a bunch of white space, right? And you want to get the what white space is just this empty space right here. And a lot of values actually, especially user input, they may do something like this. Let's say that you're looking for a name. They may accidentally put a space in the beginning and at the end as well. So how do you get rid of this? So the easiest way to do it is value.trim. So a lot of times you'll just add this value.trim. Oops, sorry, you have to invoke it. So you'll use this value.trim to kind of clean up your inputs so that you're not saving white space into your databases. So that's it for strings. Now the next section is like super quick, and it's just we're going to talk about objects and some of the most common and useful methods that are attached to the object. So let's get right into objects. Now there's a lot of different methods, but I just want to show you guys two things real quickly that objects has to offer, and I think they're the most important for objects. One is values, and the way you use this is you say the keyword object, and then you say values, the method you're calling, and you pass in the object that you want to basically print out all the values of. So let's the console log that, print that out, and then there it is. In an array, it returns all the values that are in the object, and just like that, you could also do keys, and basically it just prints out all the keys in the object. So name, age, and job. So you could imagine doing a lot of interesting things, right? So you could call the values, you could iterate over them, and check if certain values exist. So those are the two I think most important methods that are attached to the object data type. And I think I'm going to leave it for now. If I just kind of keep adding to this, the video will get too long, and I want you guys to kind of start consuming this. You know, this JavaScript series, we're almost done actually. There's not much left, I believe, at least in the core principles of JavaScript. And I want to move on. I want to move on to something that's more interesting, like React, for example, or Node. And I'm sure you guys are itching to get to those steps as well. So I hope you guys enjoy this particular lessons. Let's quickly talk about the challenges here. So if you have done the previous challenge already, the previous video already, we already gone through tic-tac-toe and object access. Those are pretty straightforward challenges. I released that video on Monday. Now we also have summing up all the numbers in an array. I didn't go over this particular method, but you should be able to figure it out. The hint is to using the reduce method in the array object. Once I go over the higher order functions, it will make a lot more sense to you guys as well why I put this particular challenge here. The next thing to do is deep compare. Now you will need the two methods that I talked to you guys about in this to do deep compare. But in JavaScript, one thing to note is that when you do object, let's say that you have two objects that are exactly the same in terms of key value pairs, and when you try to compare them to one another, you'll notice that they're not equal to each other. The value will read false. When you do triple equals object 1, triple equals object 2, it'll be false. The reason why is in JavaScript, these objects are referencing different points in memory, and there's no way for them to check whether they're not really checking if the key values are the same. They just say, hey, it's different points in memory, they're different objects, they're different things. So what you need to do is to create a deep compare function, and all that is you have to go through every key and the values associated with that key and see if they're the same. And if all key values are a match, the object is equal. It's a pretty interesting, I would say it will be probably one of the more involved challenges for you guys, because you have to work with objects, you got to get all the values and the keys, and then you have to compare the arrays to each other and things like that. So it'll be a lot of fun. So ordering kind of matters and things like that. So go ahead and try to solve that particular challenge. And that's it. That's it for this particular data structures, objects, and arrays. One thing to know, a lot of things to know, it looks like. I didn't go over like the standard algorithm-based data structures because that I will leave for another time. And there, I believe basically each data structure in like the standard algorithm term requires like a video of its own, like stacks, queues, things like that. They all require their own videos and maybe multi-part videos, because they're important core fundamental parts of programming. And but yeah, so I digress. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are able to continue chugging along these videos, because we're very close to getting to write our first website. And I hope you guys join me in the next one.